Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bull Breakdowns here on the Guilty as Charged podcast YouTube channel. My name is Alex, as always, and we are here to talk about a Chargers 27-10 win over the Browns in Cleveland, and a big win to get back to 2 games over 500 at 5-3 for the first time since they opened the season at 2-0. So my plan today is we are going to talk about the Browns game. And I do want to spend a little time at the end of the episode to talk about the trade deadline, which is, of course, coming up tomorrow. So some big things to discuss there. Want to talk about just general philosophy, of course, some guys that the Chargers could acquire. But let's get into the game. And it really feels like this is the first game this season where the Chargers just kind of outright controlled things from the jump and never really gave it back. I'll start with the defensive performance first because this was a special one from Jesse Minter. Jameis Winston, of course, coming off of a pretty hot game against the Ravens last week after replacing Deshaun Watson from injury. It wasn't a perfect game. The Ravens dropped a couple of picks too, but still did more than enough to kind of energize that offense to a win, and that was a concern coming in, right? Jesse Minter said as much in his post-game or his pre-game press conference, talking about how they would kind of deal with Winston, as well as Nick Chubb. And I think the plan in this game kind of existed on two fronts, where stop Chubb, right? Minter mentioned the lack of success that they had against James Conner in terms of converting those tackles, getting those tackles, and stopping him in the backfield. So the plan was there, but they didn't execute it. And then they had a big physical running back coming at them in Chubb today, and they hold him to 2.6 yards per carry, I believe. Or no, I think he was at like 2.3. I think he's at 2.6 for the season. 15 carries for 39 yards, if I remember properly. And that was kind of the story of the game to some extent. The Chargers being able to contain the run with lighter boxes and then having all of your DBs kind of downfield to fluster Jameis. And they did that quite a bit. The Browns receivers outside of Tillman weren't able to get a ton of separation and complete some of those catches. And I think the amount of just opportunity that existed in converting some of those Jameis turnovers, which was a key coming into the game. Chargers ultimately get 3 picks, could have been more. They have 12 pass deflections, I believe, from this game on the day. So great effort to see from the secondary, and in particular, an impressive effort from the secondary too, given how many pieces they're down. No Fulton this game. ASJ is on IR. And they have Eli Apple playing some slot snaps along with Derwin. When Ja comes out of this game with the fibula injury. And then a lot of it fell on Cam Hart and Tarheeb Still in particular to figure it out, right? And that's not something, as Harbaugh said, that you usually can throw at 2 rookie 5th-round pick corners and say, go get it, right? But they've built up that trust, certainly with Minter and the coaching staff, partially out of necessity, given the injury circumstances, but both of them perform amicably. Tarheeb, I think, had an interception, a PBU that almost resulted in another interception, and then a close to a second interception that hit the ground. So that was a pretty, impressive ball hawkish performance for him, just being in the right spots at the right time. I think he had like a 35.1 passer rating thrown against him. If my PFF numbers check out properly there. So that was a great performance from him. Cam Hart was pretty good in this game, pretty solid as well. And it just felt like the defense had this very fast-paced kind of energy to them. No better example of that than Dion, who ends up having 14 tackles this game. It just felt like he was all over the field. He almost got his hands on an interception too that was resulted in a pass deflection that could have taken another one from Jameis. But I was really, really impressed with Dion in this game. And you can just see the development slowly, game by game by game. As Harbaugh likes to say, building, better. That was just great stuff to see from Dion in particular. And the Chargers have really needed somebody to step up in that role. I think it was Popper who pointed out at the press conference a couple weeks ago, maybe, just like how much better the defense seems to like pop when Dion is on the field relative to it being Perriman or Colson, who's still coming along, mostly because Perriman's a little bit older, has some of his deficiencies in pass coverage. Colson's still coming along as a tackler as well. And then Dion is just, his emergence cannot be overstated enough in how important it is for the Chargers defense. So very nice to see the game from Mr. Dion Henley today. Bunch of other defensive shout outs to give as well in terms of individual performances. Morgan Fox showed up. Khalil Mack, obviously, as always. I feel like I post the top 5 PFF grades every week on Twitter for those of you who are familiar with that. And I feel like this season I've seen Khalil Mack in the top 5 at 1 every week as he comes up with big sacks, big pressures, his impact in the run game as well. And then I will say, even Joey Bosa, I think, started the first half a little slow. But even in the second half, there were a couple pass rushes where I thought you could kind of feel his impact. One Jameis 3-and-out sequence I remember where I think Bosa was held and was still able to kind of get a pressure on Jameis and force him into an interception. So that was a nice bounce back for him compared to last week where he came up empty as a pass rusher on pressures for the first time in his career. So I thought nice little bounce back game from him. Obviously, he's still pretty athletically limited in what he can do. But if they can kind of get that situational pass rusher for the rest of the season, even if Bosa isn't going to be at kind of a full capacity, I still think that is ultimately a good thing. Thule was all over the place today in a good way. I should clarify. He, again, kind of like Dion, playing with his hair on fire. Also made some a great special teams play where he just stuffed a returner. So pretty crazy to me that he, considering the nature of Bosa's injury, he's playing really the edge rusher opposite Mack and is still playing special team snaps, which is not something you traditionally see from a starting edge, essentially. But the Chargers have kind of done that out of necessity from what they need. And Thule has stepped up to the plate absolutely big time. So I thought that was great from him. On the interior, you have Fox, you have Tito, Puna Ford, huge game from him too. Really just clicking kind of everywhere on defense today. Usually on defense, it's like, that guy wasn't that great. You could kind of squint your eyes a little bit. I thought some of the performances, honestly, from Alohi and Derwin in some recent games haven't been all that great. But today, both of them showed up. Derwin got his hands on a couple of passes. Alohi obviously gets the interception off of Winston. So, I thought the secondary, like I said, in general, was super opportunistic. And it's, about how fast and reactive they played, where they can see kind of where Jameis is even going to, throw the ball before he throws it. And that's the amount of DBs they're able to have back there, how well Jesse Minter has trained them to some extent in this defense, and the success, like I said earlier, that they were able to have against Chubb in the run game, which allowed them to kind of, pull everybody back and, force Jameis into some bad throws, force him into some mistakes, which was key coming into this game. So nice day all around for the defense. Anytime you hold the team to 10 points, it would have been 3 points if it wasn't for, a great toe tap by Cedric Tillman, kind of in garbage time to some extent, but he was super impressive today, actually. So credit to him. But overall, really great Chargers defensive performance against a team where we had some question marks, right? Not necessarily that the Browns were this juggernaut, but I did think you could tell offensively they did a lot of things that clicked last week. And for the Chargers to come out and have this enthusiastic of a performance, despite their injuries, despite the secondary kind of being where it is injury-wise, despite Bosa not being full-time starter, they still have not missed a beat. And it's a different person, different player, some of the same players now, like Cam Hart and Tarheeb Still that are stepping up every week. And so great stuff to see from the defense. Just love this game as a whole from them. And Jesse Minter continues his reign as the top scoring defense. Please don't interview him for head coaching jobs. Anyway, let's talk about the offense now. Switch gears a little bit. I thought this was, I think their highest scoring output of the season at 27 points. And, I didn't think it was a perfect offensive game. I thought Herbert in the first half, immaculate performance. I think he was 14 of 16, 2 touchdowns, 158.3 passer rating at halftime, despite being sacked 6 times in the first half. We'll talk about the 6 sacks later, but just in terms of Herbert this game, obviously the Chargers pass game did not have as many opportunities available to them in the second half with Cleveland's adjustments, but overall, great stuff from Justin Herbert, and I think he's played some of the best football out there. I think he's the league leader in fewest turnovers with I think just 1 interception. I don't know. I know about INTs. I'm sure fumbles factor into there. But yeah, he has the fewest interceptions in the league. Still is producing, incredibly offensively and still taking some of the riskier throws and nailing them. So I think that was great to see from Herbert just these past couple of weeks, ever since it's been clear that he was healthier at the bye. I just think you've seen Justin continue to ramp up his play, which is obviously really good stuff and really promising for the defense going forward. So shout out to him. We could talk about, no, let's talk about the wide receivers first, and then we'll go to the offensive line and some of the issues that they've had there. I really think you saw the impact in this game that defenses are paying attention to Ladd McConkey, in particular on tape. I noticed on that first Josh Palmer touchdown, which ended up being kind of a wide open, busted coverage. They have Ladd running on the inside, and then the safety over top comes in and helps on Ladd. And then when I think it was Ward peels off of Palmer, that, when Ward peels off of Palmer and expects that safety help over the top, that then goes to Ladd. Miscommunication on the Browns' part, but Herbert picks that apart immediately. And I think it shows some of the gravity that Ladd has in terms of the respect from defenses and defensive backs on tape, especially after last week against the Saints. So if the Chargers, again, get this version of Ladd consistently week to week to week, which we're seeing now, he had a pretty good game today too, certainly from not necessarily his gaudiest or flashiest performance from a total yardage or standpoint necessarily compared to the Saints game, but still a very good game for him. So I think you saw, just the amount of attention and coverage respect he, asks from defenses now. And that's great to see. If the Chargers are able to get, another outside receiver target at the deadline, another tight end, right? Like that's just kind of something that I think can help open this offense up a little bit, because they have, the pieces there, especially with Ladd. But it's just, you need one more guy, maybe 2 more guys to kind of open this offense up to its full potential. And so, reinforcements, could be coming. We'll see. But I thought that was a super impressive performance from Herbert today. Like I mentioned, QJ return game. He ends up having, I think it was 118 yards for the game on 4 catches. Some of that on that like hook and lateral crazy play at the end of the half. That was a fun one to watch. I knew it probably wasn't going to be a touchdown, and it was a little bummed when JK ends up running out of bounds. But it was fun to watch it while it was going on. So that would have been a fun way to score. But QJ, I think, made his presence felt in a bit of a similar way to Palmer. Had some nice throws from Justin Herbert, but most notably, no big drops to speak of. And there were a couple moments where you hold your breath a little bit, even though QJ has not been nearly as bad in terms of drops this season, but you still hold your breath a little bit and you're like, that one where he, wide open back shoulder, is he going to catch it? And he does and runs it in for a 66-yard score. So it was nice to see him back today. And I hope that they also can engineer some ways to get him more of that short, medium of the field stuff too. I think we will see that coming up in coming weeks. They tried to jet sweep with him today. They also tried to jet sweep with Jalen Reagor, which, but Quentin, I thought this was a nice little bounce back game for him. Palmer was solid. Really, most of the receivers, I think, carried themselves pretty well today. I don't think these are performances that are going to stop the Chargers for looking at wide receiver talent at the deadline. But nice to know the room is in a better state now with QJ back, with Davis back, and then eventually next week, DJ Chark should be back. But we'll see on that. The Chargers did activate him from IR before this game. Let me get to some of the offensive line stuff now, I guess. And yeah, the offensive line is still not great, and it doesn't help that the interior offensive line issues were magnified in this game because of what Myles Garrett is doing on the outside to both Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater. I think Alt ended up giving 5 pressures this game. Slater gets pushed backwards for 2 sacks, which is not something you say very often. 2 back-to-back sacks versus Myles Garrett. At some point, you just got to throw your hands up and go, that's Myles Garrett. That's what he does. He is an absolute insane player. Just to be able to watch him, even as an opposing fan, absolute privilege. Big fan of your game. But yeah, no, the interior offensive line has really struggled. I thought you saw Zion struggle in particular with some stunts in this game, which has kind of been the storyline of his season to some extent. And that wasn't great. Bozeman, I still, think it's like Stevens talked about with Bozeman, where there are some certain plays where even if he kind of figures out how to block, well and reads the block and is exactly where he's supposed to be, just not quite athletic enough player for what the Chargers need on the interior, preferably next to Zion and Pipkins. But, you're riding him for the rest of the season, obviously. So, yeah, and I think you just see with those 3 guys in particular, and Zion and Trey and Bose, which, has been the story. I really specified Zion and Bozeman out of that group in terms of, the pass blocking issues. Certainly Pipkins is in there as well. And obviously Alton Slater did not have banner days either going up against number 95. But yeah, it just feels like we're not seeing a lot of that development from the offensive line going forward. A lot of the same things kind of flustering them every week. And it really showed up to me when the Chargers in the second half just don't trust their run game. Even in the first half, there were, I think, like Dobbins for the longest time until that last touchdown drive had 2 carries for a while in the first. And then I think he was on 13 for 51. And then he breaks the big touchdown to end the game. And they get a little bit of a nice bounce back in terms of their run protection at the end of that game with that final score. So credit to the offensive line and credit to Dobbins for, sort of recognizing the issue and adjusting in game to sort of close it out versus Cleveland. But I don't know, they get that one, but still consistently for really a quarter and 1.75 quarters, they were up 20-3 and really didn't build on that lead. We've talked about second half Greg Roman a little bit, but they really did not trust their run game at all after the lack of success in the first half in the macro. And I think that is kind of a problem because I think you're going to be in positions against some of these teams over here that will be on the Chargers schedule coming up. And if you build a lead on the Bengals, if you build a lead on the Ravens, you build a lead on the Falcons or Chiefs, you want to be able to run the ball, right? And so Cleveland and the Saints and the Panthers, I'm not taking anything away from those wins, big wins, but I just have a feeling that they are going to need to produce more offensively against some of these teams coming up. We've seen what Baltimore's offense has done. Cincy puts up 41 yesterday, and they can do that. So as much as I trust Jesse Minter's defense, the lack of run game is still concerning. The pass game getting better, but they did take advantage of a couple broken plays today. So I just want to see it more consistently from this offense putting it together, especially in terms of pass protection, run blocking, and maybe you get one more wide receiver, tight end at the deadline to kind of help out with some of that offensive load. But overall, not a bad game today offensively by any means. I mean, they scored 27 points. Credit to them. But just a couple issues that you see with the offensive line that you not necessarily next week against the Titans, but you could see them struggling against some of the better teams if they still have quite the issues and the level of issues they had in pass pro and run blocking today. So something to see, check out going forward. Let's get to trade deadline really quickly. I'll just mention special teams just because I didn't think it was the best day from J.K. Scott. Dicker misses a PAT and misses a field goal. Pretty uncharacteristic of him, although he's missed 2 PATs in back-to-back weeks, which isn't great. But, I mean, they still trust Cameron Dicker to figure it out, and so do all of us. So I'm not necessarily concerned about that. And a little bit of a welcome back party for Darius Davis, who ends up getting a 53-yard punt return, and which directly led to a field goal. Interesting that they had McConkey decide to field some punt returns as well. I don't think he ended up returning any, just some fair catches. But that was not the plan, certainly, prior to Darius Davis's injuries this season. They had Darius Davis doing everything as a returner. So I just thought that was a little bit of an interesting note. But anyway, let's get to the trade deadline. So in general, I think Jeremy Fowler reported this weekend that the Chargers are rumored to be window shopping. Window shopping, of course, means you look at pretty objects in the window and then don't actually buy them, which is me whenever I go to the mall. But I do think they will look at their options. I do not think they will be super aggressive necessarily in terms of utilizing their future resources and some of their capital in that way, but I do think they will pursue upgrades at wide receiver, notably cornerbacks available. We can get into that a little bit now. I guess wide receiver names that I like starting first. Mike Williams would obviously make a lot of sense. I don't know how much of a difference maker he is necessarily right now. And you can make the argument that if DJ Chark comes back, the role is a little bit redundant, but still familiarity with Justin Herbert, and just a chance to add another outside body, I think is potentially worth it, especially for as cheap of a cost as he'll come. Pittsburgh is kind of rumored to be the team that's most interested in him, and we'll see if the Jets even end up trading Mike Williams because they had Alan Lazard go on IR prior to their Thursday night victory. So Darius Slayton is my preferred wide receiver trade target. I think he is kind of the best total outside wide receiver available. Small problem with him now. I think he is in concussion protocol after last night's Washington game or yesterday's Washington game. So we'll see if that changes anything in terms of his availability. The Giants have been said to want to hold on to him unless they're blown away by an offer. Who knows how steadfast they are on that? I don't know. I do kind of think he is the best wideout available. And then you get into your not actually available category, which includes T. Higgins. That's something I think the Bengals are going to deal with in the offseason. Trying to think of just some other wide receiver deadline names off the top of my head. The Chargers, as Steven and Tyler said, were in the running for Deontay Johnson. So, I do think that is something to watch going forward, just, in their interest of a wide receiver and how much do they want to upgrade, right? KJ Osborne is another guy that's available. Adam Thielen available, although, I think that is a little bit redundant just because they don't really need another slot guy right now. with Ladd, it doesn't make a ton of sense. Let's see. I'm just scrolling through this Bleacher Report article just because I've forgotten some of the names. But yeah, there will be some, wide receiver movement to watch. I think Williams and Slayton are probably the most acquirable for the Chargers and most likely to kind of just make that instant difference in the offense. Osborne, again, obviously from the Patriots, I mentioned. That is kind of the wide receiver market. I think, unfortunately, after the Deontay thing, it has whittled down a little bit, but still not bad, of course. So we'll see if the Jets are willing to trade him and if Mike Williams would, come home to the Chargers or if he goes to the Steelers, who have been a rumored team. Let's talk about corner. Tre'Davious White, available from the Rams, has been a healthy scratch, I think, in their games. Not quite what he used to be, but if for a team that needs corner help, could the Chargers consider it? Maybe. Obviously, would not have to relocate, which is, something to consider if the Chargers were to kind of make a deal there for Trey White. The name that does stick out to me, though, and the more I've thought about it, is Marshawn Lattimore. I think there would be other teams that are willing to buy on his future contract and some of the things that you would kind of need to require to enter the Lattimore sweepstakes. If I check his deal on Over the Cap right now, I think he is signed through really 2026, which isn't that bad, but his cap number next year is big. I don't know if it will actually end up being $31 million. I think some of that includes like Saints restructures, which if they were to trade him, I don't think goes against the Chargers. But yeah, so it would be a big cap number to, still utilize on a corner, even if it doesn't end up necessarily being that high of a cap number for the Chargers. Are they, and this is a question broadly, I'll use another example in a minute when I talk about this. How much future financial capital are the Chargers willing to give up? Right? This is a question because, they can open up potentially $100 million in cap space next year. They have $70 million roughly right now. A couple extensions, cut Joey Bosa, you can get to $100 million, right? That's where they're kind of at. And do they, for a player like Lattimore, do you want to spend upwards of 20, 25 million on his cap hit next year when you're opening up 100 million, right? That's a question. I think that's worth asking, right? Hunter Henry is another player who New England doesn't really want to trade, so you might have to overpay in terms of draft capital to be able to get him. Maybe a third, fourth round pick there, and then take on his 11.5 billion dollar cap number next year, right? So this is a question where if I'm thinking like I am Joe Ortiz or Jim Harbaugh, I do think they're more into the get an expiring contract this season and then, sort of see where the cards fall to some extent next year. I don't think they want to use a bunch of cap space for guys that are signed through next year. Doesn't mean they can acquire some money, sure. But I don't know if they want a big, like 10 plus million cap hit in 2025 to acquire in addition to giving up draft capital, considering, some of their free agency plans next year and the fact that they cooked the books this year and reset everything to essentially be active in free agency next year and be active, in the draft, be active in some of these trade negotiations. Is that something they want to leverage right now as opposed to waiting into the offseason? I tend to not think so. I think they would go more the expiring route, which is why for me, I don't think Hunter Henry is an option as much as I would love him. And Njoku's contract, people have talked about him. I don't think the Browns are going to trade him, but he's actually pretty affordable if you look at his OTC stuff as far as, the next couple of years on his contract are concerned. So that is not necessarily a concern with him. I was talking about quarterbacks with Marshawn Lattimore, so I'll circle back to that because I kind of got off topic with Hunter Henry. But Lattimore is obviously a corner. If you want somebody cheaper, I do think Brandon Eccles from the Jets makes a lot of sense if they're willing to sell. DJ Reed is a guy from the Jets that makes a lot of sense if they are willing to sell. More cost-effective options than somebody like Lattimore necessarily. So yeah, I mentioned those guys. And then really, yeah, tight end is interesting because I think there are, some things that you can obviously do there as far as, acquiring maybe a Henry or Njoku, but, potentially I'll even mention kind of a name like Chiga Okonkwo from the Titans, who the Chargers, would theoretically play next week, I guess, if he's not dealt by the deadline. But I would mention Okonkwo because he is, a really good yards after the catch guy. They have sorely missed that in the tight end room. Is it possible that they can get him? I don't know. We'll see if the Titans really want to sell with where they're at right now and how much they prioritize just having him as a future asset for the team. I don't know. Austin Hooper is another guy who can kind of do the Hayden Hurst stuff to a degree. Hurst has obviously been injured this year didn't make too much impact on the game yesterday. So do they again just kind of want another receiver body at tight end? In additional kind of what they have already, I could see that. So really, those are my three positions going into this deadline: are wide receiver, corner, and tight end. Getting into specifically what capital I think the Chargers are sort of willing to move on with in these trades. Obviously, we saw, the Deontay Johnson trade ended up being a 5th-round pick swap with Baltimore. And so I think in terms of that 5th, 6th-round pick type range is about what you can expect for some of these receivers that are left, at least the ones that we know are available. And so I kind of think that is what Joe Ortiz is willing to go up to. Obviously, for a player like Lattimore or Hunter Henry, who have future years on their contract or something, that's a little bit different. But I think in terms of these supplementary needs or some of the, smaller corners, smaller wideouts, tight ends on the market where the Chargers just kind of want to beef up the roster a little bit, I think those are more their day 3 picks. And then kind of like I said, if they are willing to invest in a player who has down the road future years on their contract, that could be a place where I think they are willing to invest that. But I don't know if they are prepared to make that move this year and get players with future years on their contracts relative to some of the other teams on the market who could pry maybe a Lattimore, for example. I think there might be other teams who are cap deficient in future years that might use that trade opportunity to get free agent opportunities they may not end up having like the Chargers could next year. So I think it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of the trade market. I don't think that there is that instant difference maker available, but I do think for 5th-round pick, 6th-round pick, 7th-round pick, some combination of day 3 assets, you can still, put together some pretty good guys for this roster who can, combine with what you have on offense already. So, excited to see what the Chargers do at the trade deadline, if anything at all. I'm not expecting a whole lot. I'm expecting maybe 1-2 moves. I do think wide receiver, if I had a bet, will end up happening. It's a matter of, what is the right fit there. And then I can see probably second most likely to that corner and them investigating with some of their need there. And then probably looking at some of the tight ends available. But we'll see what happens. So happy trade deadline. Happy election day. Go vote, I guess, on Tuesday. And happy that the Chargers got this win over the Browns. Exciting stuff. And they have a chance to get to 6-3 and 6 wins over the Titans next week to eclipse their 5-12 5-win total from last season in the first year under Harbaugh, basically at halfway through the season. So pretty exciting stuff. Great game. And fuck the Browns. Bolt up and go Chargers.